Welcome to the Neighborhood Law Center. I'm your host, Melvin Burruss, and our guest today is Yolunda Harrell, who's president of the New Hill Development Corporation. Yolunda was here with us last week, and she told us some of the things about the implementation of the New Hill development and how it was going. But we had such a demand to hear some other things from her. For instance, the entrepreneur ecosystem, the financial ecosystem, and why there is such a lack of minority entrepreneurs in most of these towns and cities. And she's going to kind of give us some insight into what we can do and what she's doing and the organizations she works with to help entrepreneurs and get them not only capital, which is the number one thing, but other services and things that they need. Thank you for coming to us today. Do you want to give our audience a little background for those who didn't hear about you last week?
Oh, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me on again, having New Hill Development Corporation on again. So New Hill Development Corporation, of course, is a social it's an African-American-led social enterprise. We focus on financial resilience, entrepreneurship, and home ownership. Our goal is to create more economic opportunities for the Black community of Charlottesville. So that's our focus. The last time we talked about a number of things, but we kind of ended on that conversation about the ecosystem, the economic or the financial ecosystem, but really the Black business or that Black dollar ecosystem, which we're hoping to better participate in and have more people participating in the Charlottesville area.
Okay. What has been the obstacles of entrepreneurs developing here in the Central Virginia area? As we know in many places, you've got entrepreneurs running quite a few businesses and corporations and software companies and engineering companies. Mm-hmm. So what happened here or what can we do here in the Central Virginia to get to that point where we have entrepreneurs doing, as we said before, software, biotech, other things like that?
Yeah, so Charlottesville, again, during urban renewal, had a number of Main Street, if you will, Black-owned businesses that were doing very well. The ecosystem was very good because you had neighborhoods that were right there that the businesses helped to support, and those neighborhoods supported the businesses. And so when those businesses started to get raised as a result of urban renewal here in Charlottesville, what that did is that really stunted the business growth and development in Charlottesville area. And if my understanding serves me correctly, during that period of time, because of the covenant restrictions and where Black people could own businesses, they could only have them set up in Black neighborhoods. But if you were systematically going about getting rid of the Black neighborhoods, and that limited the space where a Black business could operate. Now, some of these businesses did relocate and open up again in other neighborhoods, but the community and the relationships that they had established were broken. And so that really stunted the growth of the financial system amongst the Black community, as well as the wealth building opportunity in our community. And so now as we spring forward to today, Charlottesville is a very expensive place. It's basically, like a little version of Northern Virginia in terms of how much it costs to be able to do business in Charlottesville. So at the time that we did our market analysis, when we were doing a study, our work for the Star Hill Vision Plan, one of the things that we chose to do during that period was to do a market analysis so that we could have a good understanding of what is it like on a multitude of fronts for the Black experience in Charlottesville, but just experience in general in terms of entrepreneurism, housing, social determinants of health, those sorts of things. And so when we looked at the ecosystem in terms of entrepreneurship, what we discovered is that in Charlottesville, vacancy rates were low. And what that means is because they're low, that means rents are able to be very high. And so the amount of money that landlords were expecting in terms of lease agreements were pretty significant when especially when you compare it to other cities that have urban sprawl, that have the ability to create way more demand, so they're able to drive the costs down. In our particular area, we don't have as much sprawl, and so as a result, the demand is very high. And because we also are a very sought after place to live and to have a business in, and so what that meant was we had about people were looking for $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month, and they wanted a 5-year lease agreement. Now, of course, that may look very different in a post-COVID world, but during that time or leading up to that this year, what we saw was that really excluded a lot of folks, because you've got to have a significant amount of capital or be pretty sure that you're going to be able to continuously support that level of overhead. And again, that's just one piece. That's just your rent. We haven't even gotten into all the other things that you're going to need to support your business. And so that's if you wanted a storefront business. And so what we also discovered in talking with banks and lending institutions like micro lenders like the Community Investment Collaborative or Fountain Fund, folks like that were doing lending in the community on a microloan level, they were lending at a maximum of $35,000, and they still are right now. I think they're looking to raise those limits. But when they set that limit of $35,000, it was because previously there was an agreement, or they thought that there was an agreement that they would go to this amount because the banks didn't want to deal with the smaller loans, and then the banks would kind of pick it up from there. Well, that hasn't really been the case, because what the banks are looking for is a considerable amount of collateral or assets that you can put up to be able to get a more sizable loan. And so what that has done, and what we found in talking with entrepreneurs during this process, was that many entrepreneurs had much bigger dreams, but their dreams had to be minimalized to where their capital was. And so our goal is to help to finance those dreams and encourage those dreams to be bigger, because we know that if they are, then that's going to benefit our community as a whole. And so we've got to find ways to make sure that they have the necessary resources, especially from a capital perspective, to be able to seed those dreams.
Okay. Well, you mentioned something that's very dear to my heart is the bank's best interest to invest in Black entrepreneurship in communities of color in general. And I guess there's this tool, the CRA. Have we tried to implement that? It's called the Community Reinvestment Act.
Correct.
Have we tried to use that tool to shake up some some dollars from the banks? Because the overall, the lending is very poor in this area as far as people of color.
So, so banks definitely are rated based on how much they are lending, how much they are supporting communities that have typically been disadvantaged or marginalized. And so some of our banks that are here locally, especially the ones that represent larger institutions, they are able to get more credit because the institution itself is much larger, and so it has a larger footprint. So, yes, to answer your question, the goal is to get more of that deployed. The problem is there has to also be a movement on the part of the local banking system that says, we want to deploy our funds in a different way. We want to see that this is a valuable system to invest in, and to, not necessarily look for the highest returns. Now, banks are going to tell you, rightfully so, that they work on small margins, and so they've got to make sure that those margins are protected. They are, publicly traded, and so they do have a responsibility to their shareholders to make sure that they're making good investments. But I think the pushback on that is that so many other banks are doing it, and they're doing it very successfully. And most recently, Citigroup, I believe it's Citigroup, that it released a report talking about just exactly how much racism has cost us as a nation. And that number was pretty significant. It was in the trillions of dollars. And so when we think about some of the reasons that some of these lending institutions use to say that this is not a good investment, what we are working to do at New Hill is to give them all the reasons to say yes. So yeah, there may not be the asset of a home, or there may not be, a 401k that they can leverage, or there may not be other types of real estate that they may own that can be put up as collateral. But what else can we consider? And so part of what we're looking to do as we are developing out this pillar under the New Hill organization is to find friendly capital that is willing to take on those risks, to find other social entrepreneurs that are willing, or our foundations that are willing to put up guarantees to say, okay, we believe in this system. Maybe you don't see it yet, Mr. Banker or Mrs. Banker, but we see it. And so what we're willing to do is say, we're going to put some money into a fund, and we're going to guarantee your loan loss. And so in the event that, some of these loans don't work out, then we're going to make sure that you're covered. When I've talked to other organizations around the country that have such things in place, what I hear over and over and over again is that they typically never have to touch those reserves. That, typically Black, minority, women, they are some of the best risks that a business or an investor can take, because they get so few shots. And so they take those opportunities very seriously. They're going to make sure that if you're willing to give me this money to do this great business idea that I have, then I'm going to make sure you get that return and you're going to get your money back. And so I think it's just unfortunately, it's just part of what is left over from some of the racist systems that are in place that, that really kind of color the thinking and color the willingness to take those necessary chances or risk. And in a lot of cases, they really aren't risks. They just seem as though they are risks simply because that's how you perceive them.
Okay. We're at the break. Thank you. That was very interesting and informative. We're at the break. This is Melvin Burruss. I'm your host with the Neighborhood Law Center, and we have our guest today as Yolunda Harrell, who's president of New Hill Development Corporation. And we just went over New Hill Development, which we talked about last week, but we're getting some more in-depth education now about Black entrepreneurship in the community. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, and you just kind of glazed on it, the impact. What impact does a history of slavery and Jim Crow laws have on the present day's racism in this whole scheme of things?
So it still has significant effects on our ability to be able to progress in this financial world that we live in this capital society that we live in. You have things like redlining that took place, right? That would say that this particular area is not a good area to invest in, and this is what those lines would say to the banks, right? That if you look at the map and this area is redlined, then this is your low worth area, and typically those areas were areas where Black people lived or communities of color in general. And as a result, those are the places that banks didn't want to invest in, either in, lending money for home purchase or for capital for businesses.
Or insurance.
Or insurance, absolutely. Now, the good
Property
thing,
insurance.
right? Exactly. But what I think we were very great at doing during those moments was that we said, okay, well, if you don't want to do it, we'll do it ourselves, right?
Exactly.
And so we created our own banks, and we created our own insurance companies, and we created our own businesses to support each other. And as a result, we were building wealth as a community, right? And so more people were able to buy homes, and more people were able to start businesses, and more people were experiencing a shift away from maybe some of their lower income that they may have started out with, then they were able to shift. Well, when we started to raise communities across the nation, that really stunted that growth. And then you also usher in desegregation, which is in itself not a bad thing. But what that also did is it broke up some of this desire to do business with business owners that look like you, right? Mm-hmm. And so because some of these communities have gone away, that there's no longer that neighborhood relational community support for that business. But then also now we have our individuals that are shopping wherever they want to shop. And so that really kind of stunted the growth of Black business across our nation. Part of what we talk about when we say an ecosystem is how do we get back to some of that? There's absolutely nothing wrong for me to say that I want to do business specifically with someone that looks like me, because what that's going to do is going to help our community to be able to circle the dollars before they leave our community. And so that allows more of us to be able to build wealth within our community. So many other ethnicities in our nation do this very well. The Jewish community does it very well. The Asian community does it very well. There's been studies that say that you've got, I think it's the Asian community, that their dollar circulates for like 28 days before it leaves their community. And then I think it's the Jewish community, it circulates maybe like 20 days. In the Black community, it circulates 6 hours before it leaves our community. So that means that no other Black people really are touching that same dollar before it goes out of the Black community into another community, which drives the wealth in that particular community. It's not about saying that we don't want to support other businesses. What we're saying is, how do we ensure that we're being intentional so that as we are growing our own individual wealth, that we're able to help those around us grow their wealth as well. And so we do that by being intentional about where we spend our money and who we spend our money with. But the problem with that that typically comes up that we see in Charlottesville is that folks don't know where to go to spend their money with Black-owned businesses. So you have various members of the community that are looking to help address that issue. You have a young lady, Destiny, who is working on the Black Business Directory, and New Hill is providing her some support in helping get that together, so that so she can launch her website that demonstrates where all these Black businesses are, because not all of them are storefront, public-facing businesses. But then there's other folks out here that want to have those storefronts, that want to get into your software, your biotech, those types of businesses. But what they feel like is that they don't have that social support here in Charlottesville. That the ceiling is very low in terms of a Black individual's ability to rise in terms of their entrepreneurial pursuits in Charlottesville. And so our goal is to create, a system that supports them, so they feel like that they can pursue that dream here, that there will be access to capital here, that they don't have to go to Richmond or to DC or to other areas where you have a larger population of Black people that are able to support what they're doing. We want them to feel like that they can develop those businesses in our area as well, because those are going to produce higher paying jobs. What we know, studies show this, that people tend to hire people that look like them, right?
Right.
So, and nobody says anything.
That's correct.
You know, when a business looks majority one way. Now, they aren't anymore, right? People are waking up to the fact like, hey, that business doesn't look very diverse. But for so many years, no one thought about if a white male owned a business and everybody in that business was white.
White males, yeah.
Yeah, white males, predominantly white males, or white males and white females. And so since we know that those things happen, then if we have more business owners that are black, then they're going to potentially hire more black people as well, and they're going to create more opportunity. What we see in our black community is that oftentimes we are very concerned about our neighbor, that we want to make sure that if we're eating, they're eating, that if we're making money, they're making money. So the more of us that can get in those positions where we are able to hire people, then we know that those individuals are going to hire more people that look like them, that are going to give them better wages than they may otherwise get in another organization. And they're going to be thinking about, you know, the growth opportunities for that particular individual.
Okay. And this, what we're talking about, can be reflected in the New Hill development, the diversity, the entrepreneurship, the culture. Matter of fact, I thought a great idea was talk to the Paramount about having a theater in that area to teach young people about the theater. And as you know, with kids, bring parents and things like that, and culture, and grow it from there. For instance, another thing is banks. There's no banks in that area, or a limited amount of banks, I should say.
Right, and so, well, the good news with Charlottesville is that Charlottesville, thank God, is not terribly big, because we do see a number of predatory lenders in our community, but not as many as we would see in other communities because of the sprawl. But to your point, if banks are not in certain areas, then that leaves those areas vulnerable to predatory practices, predatory lenders coming in and setting up storefront spaces, which are, you know, going to be your payday loans and, you know, your title loans and those sorts of things. Our goal is to make sure that, which is the goal of many people in this community, that those types of businesses are not where our community members are turning to find sources of capital. Oftentimes what you see with those are that those are like emergency type funds. What we're looking to do is to say, okay, if you've got an idea, one, not only do we want to help you bring your idea to life, but let's also talk about some opportunities that you might not have thought about in terms of your entrepreneurial pursuits. So we're working with organizations like the University of Virginia to understand where are you spending your money and where do you have where do you lack diversity in your spend, and how much of that money is being spent locally, so that we can understand how much is coming to the Charlottesville community, and then of that's coming to the Charlottesville community, how much of that is being spent in the Black community. And so if you understand that, then we understand what types of businesses do we need to grow and develop. One of the things that New Hill will be doing in 2021 is which we're making preparations for now, is to open a business incubator for Black-owned businesses, to be able to help give space, one, for businesses to be able to operate, but then also to have accelerators inside that incubator that focuses specifically on certain industries like that entrepreneurs are already interested in, but how do they get their business to the next level? Let's say retail, for instance, or let's say the food business, for instance. Those are some things, but other things that we're looking at are things like sustainable energy, solar. Solar is huge in our area, and so, but yet what we don't see is that many, or I haven't seen yet, a Black-owned solar business. That would be great to see, and think about the opportunities there, especially since that is a high-growth area. Industry in our area. And so we're looking at things like e-commerce. One of the biggest lessons that we've learned in 2020, especially when businesses had to shut down, is that a lot of them had to pivot to being able to do business online, whereas other businesses already had such a strong presence online that it really wasn't much of a pivot for them. They didn't really have to start at the ground level and try to build up. They just had to take what they were already doing and really amplify that. And so what we want to be able to do is be able to say, hey, there's some businesses that don't need a storefront at all. They just completely run e-commerce. Let's help them grow that area of their business.
Okay. Well, thanks for the education. And my audience, I know they're happy about to hear what you're saying, because you really open our eyes to a lot of different things. One thing I would like to say is, what would you like to leave with the audience? The question I wanted to ask you, your project is still before the city council or the board or the planning board. When is that coming up, and how can people help you out on that?
Yeah, so we, again, when we went to the Planning Commission, they had a couple things, they had some suggestions of things that we could do to improve the plan. And so we had to take some time to go back and look at some of those things. We had to interview a few more folks to get their perspective, and especially the historically black churches that are in the Star Hill area, to make sure that, you know, their perspective was included in the plan. And so we just finished up our last interview recently. COVID has been quite challenging in order to be able to kind of come together with people. And there's a couple other things that we need to look at. So our goal is to get those changes resubmitted within the next week or two, and get that back over so that we can then move to the next phase of it.
Okay.
But once we do that, we certainly will make an announcement so that individual, and of course the city will as well, will announce when that plan comes back before them.
Okay, we're looking forward to, so our audience and myself can go down there to support you. Just a reminder, this is Neighborhood Law Center. You can see us on the website, neighborhoodlawcenter.com. Go to YouTube, and if they want to get in touch with you, where should they email you?
Well, actually, they can just go directly to our website. We do have a contact page, and if they fill out that form, it'll come to me. And that is newhilldev.org is our website. And we'll be happy to sit down and have further conversations. And of course, our website does offer a lot of information about the three areas of our focus.
Okay, so this is Mel Burruss and Yolunda Harrell saying peace and God bless, and we'll see you next week.